what we've found most effective, it really depends. For example, for some studies, social media works better. Other studies, Google Ads works better. But I mean, you do radio ads, good luck finding your patients through those antiquated methods.
These conversations are not intended to be legal, regulatory, or clinical advice and may not be right for you. These conversations are intended for educational purposes only. Conversations on this forum do not create an attorney-client relationship. Welcome to another episode of Darshan Talks. I'm going to be talking about clinical trials today. I'm going to talk with the one, the only Mo Alsumidaie. And I probably have butchered that, but I'm going to let Mo introduce himself, tell you about all the amazing things he does and why he is the one, the only. And then we'll get into some of the fun tech talks. So we're going to talk a little bit, hopefully, about technology that enables clinical trials today and where it's going, especially as we see the advent and the influx of decentralized clinical trials. So Mo, over to you. Can you introduce yourself?
Thanks, Darshan. Well, I am the one and only. There's only one of me, but I do appreciate the praise. So, my name is Mo Alsumidaie, and I'm the head of research at Clinibiz, and also chief data scientist in the clinical corporation. And we specialize in computer data science research. And also a consulting firm. We run sites, we run studies for sponsors, and we use automation technology to pretty much advance clinical trials, make them more efficient and affordable.
So let's start with the beginning of what you just said, which is maybe we can start a little bit today with what exists right now before we start talking about what we can get into and where the future is going. But you are, many would agree, at the forefront of clinical research technology. You've seen a lot of what's coming. You've spoken to a lot of people about what's coming. You've used a lot of what's coming, including what's already here. What is, in your opinion, the technology that's here, that's being enforced? And let's start from the beginning, which is in the process of finding patients. So the promotion of clinical trials. What are things you're using from a technological standpoint that augments what you already do at a site level?
Mm-hmm. So a lot of our recruitment focus has started from study sites. And since we started it from study sites, we understand what happens from the ground up, what sites go through in a day-to-day. What we've found most effective, it really depends. For example, for some studies, social media works better. Other studies, Google Ads works better. But I mean, you do radio ads, good luck finding your patients through those antiquated methods. And the reason why it just depends, is what's great about those technologies is, of course, you can, everyone knows this. You can geofence your campaigns. You can target it to patients' interests. But what's really cool about Google Ads is that you can generate very, very targeted advertisements to specific personnel. And other things that we've found really helpful is how you design your website and your collateral. We've developed a methodology to generate leads. For example, like we put the lead form as the first thing that shows up on the website on the very top, and then patients can scroll down and learn more about the study. But essentially, the goal is to capture leads. And also, again, since we're targeting the right populations, we are getting leads that are pre-qualified. We're not getting random patients. We're getting patients who actually do have the condition. So another thing we do is after the patient has been filled out a lead form, they undergo an automation process where they receive automated text messages, automated emails.
Before we go down that path, Mo, can we explore what you just said, which is you talked about advertising and promoting a possible study. So you talked a little bit about the idea of geofencing, but before we even get into geofencing, you talked a little bit about personalization and targeting. And this can be done in a variety of ways, whether it's talking about things like Google Ads, you talk about social media, and then you can also bring in even more levels of personalization when you start talking about tagging, content marketing, all that good stuff. So there are all these buzzwords out there. There's content marketing, there's geofencing, there's social media. I mean, everyone knows what social media is, but from at a practical level, as a site, how likely are you, for example, to use LinkedIn to market a study compared to, say, using Instagram, compared to using Twitter, compared to using Facebook?
So we found that the best platform in the past has been Facebook. But now, after the new privacy from Apple came out, the ads became a lot less effective compared to what they were before. So, for example, we were advertising for an oncology study, and before we were getting great leads, but after those privacy policies got put in place, we just started getting junk leads. Like people, we call them and they're like, "What are you talking about? I don't have cancer. I don't know anyone who has cancer. I don't know what are you calling about?" So that happens, right?
Yeah.
So it started to happen. So we shifted our funding towards Google, and we've seen significant change in the quality of the patients and the ROI also.
So that's really interesting, right? So one of the things you just mentioned is that you have to keep moving. You've seen Facebook be the most effective, and now it's possibly amongst the least effective, maybe outside radio at this second. And what you tied that to was the idea that Apple came out with a policy. For those people who don't know, this is going back a few months, if not a year or so at this point. But essentially, they said that we aren't going to sell individual information, and we aren't going to allow people to be tracked across our devices. The result of that is that Facebook, which was heavily dependent on this information, suddenly lost the ability to identify individual possible subjects, possible patients who might be appropriate for your study. Has there been a drop-off, for example, in, you mentioned Google Ads, but I know Google was the other source of information that Facebook used. Do you find that still was a level of personalization that worked through Android phones? Or was it just was it just an Apple issue, or was it across the board? Facebook just suddenly, excuse my language, started sucking for this purpose.
Yeah, I think since we overall started to drop in quality in leads, like it got to a point where all of our leads were there was the same response, like, "What are you talking about?" And I don't know what the privacy policies are and how they've changed for Android, but I also know that Apple, even with Google, has like its own privacy policies. And I don't like with cookie tracking, for example, but I'm not sure how that all came into play. All I do know is that our observation has been that the quality of the leads in Facebook has declined. And this is across the board. I mean, you're looking at their security, their stock price, it went down. A lot of advertisers were jettisoning Facebook for that same reason. So there's a reason why it's, it tanked. It's tanking right now because it's not as effective as it used to be.
So that means that Facebook's bad. Does that mean Instagram's bad with it?
Yes, because Instagram is owned by Facebook and they use similar algorithms to target the same people. So, yeah.
And did you find, and this is going to sound weird because I always thought of WhatsApp, for example, as not really a social media platform at all. But every so often, depending on which country you're in, you will get targeted ads through WhatsApp. I've never quite understood how that works because it's supposed to be end-to-end encryption and all that good stuff. But did you ever do a WhatsApp-based promotional program?
No, but that's interesting to hear about. If it is end-to-end encrypted, I'm not really sure how they're generating those ads and targeting you. My assumption is that it's probably cookies. But I mean, it's a separate platform, so I'm not familiar with how that works. Although it is a great idea. Like there are some countries, for example, in Asia that prefer advertising through those, or rather communication through those apps, like Telegram and like in Thailand, for example, they love using those apps to communicate with patients. So automation using those apps would be a great idea for especially patients of minorities, for example, like Latinos use WhatsApp. Yeah, but again, like, I don't know how that fits into play. My assumption, it probably has something to do with cookies, because if it is end-to-end encrypted, it's against their policy to advertise by looking at what you're typing, right?
I wonder if it means end-to-end encryption for others looking in, not the company itself. I don't know. I've never read the official policy, so I don't know if Facebook can look in because they have the encryption key, but that's a different discussion altogether. So you talked a little bit about the idea that Facebook's not as great. Why did you not go down? So what you're using is going from paid ads using Facebook to paid ads using Google, which in many ways preceded Facebook. What I noticed you didn't say was you went down some version of Apple's targeting processes. Why is that? Is there any system out there that leverages Apple?
So iOS is a pretty closed system. It is a closed system. So that means nothing comes in, nothing comes out, except for whatever Apple defines as its own policies, right? Except Google has its own algorithms, because Apple cannot control what you type in Google's search engine, right? And Google also has its own, privacy laws, and you can also, prevent tracking, but most people don't, right? So I'm not aware of any Apple-specific applications that allow for targeting, and I do know that Apple is not in the business of advertising. They're in the business of creating really solid computers with software that supplements it, and they have focused on security. So I'm not aware of any apps that do that in Apple.
Which is interesting, right? Because it means that there is the only way to target Apple iOS users, and that's a significant group of individuals. I don't think it's 50%, because I think Google's still a larger market share, but it's above 40%. So and they tend to be more affluent. So you want to target those individuals, because from a clinical trial standpoint, where informed consent becomes less of an issue, because you're not enforcing it so that people can't afford it suddenly to participate in the clinical trials. But you can't sort of target these individuals from Apple. The only way to do that is to go through the searches that they might do in Google. How does that work if you start using things like DuckDuckGo, or start using things like Mozilla, or start using things like Internet Explorer or the like?
So I'm not sure what the business model of those companies is, right? I'm not sure how Mozilla has managed to stay in business, or Internet Explorer, honestly. Now it's called Edge, I believe.
Yeah.
But Google's business is based on the collection of data and advertising, right? It's based solely, I won't say solely, but mostly on that. So if there is a platform that is big enough for people to use, where they can share their data, it can most certainly be applicable for targeting if they offer that service. Now, which other platforms are as big as Google and effective as Google, I'm not aware. If there is, I would love to know.
Well, the one thing I'd heard about that everyone was talking about was, yes, Google's the behemoth, but why not target, for example, Bing ads, which tend to be cheaper? There may not be as many people, but it'll be cheaper. And Microsoft was literally willing to pay you to use Bing to search on their platform. Have you seen or heard about any success using that platform?
It never crossed my mind, but that is definitely something I would look into, because, I mean, it really, of course, Google has built really great, solid tools for advertising, right? And our team our our advertising team loves to use that system. Now, I think it would be a great suggestion to ask them to look into Bing, because if it's cheaper and we can get a higher ROI, why not? Those are great opportunities.
So we talked a little bit about targeting people based on their searches. There's another way to target people, which is based on their location. And that would be using things like geofencing. For those people who don't know, what is geofencing?
So geofencing is a function within your advertising platform that allows you to target specific regions. For example, a zip code, a state, a city, a region, a country. Those are all areas where you can target those patients. But typically that is coupled with, like, for example, your keywords or your interests or how you design your advertising targeting. So again, the key here is to get the patients, not necessarily the, just anyone. So when you geofence, it's another function that you add into your campaign.
So the reason I asked this question is I actually was very curious about geofencing because it sounds like such a great idea. And what I was thinking about was, let's say I wanted to find patients who might be interested in an oncology study. What I want to do is, I don't want to go after the zip code or go after the state or the country, because that's still not specific enough. What I want to do is find out the exact office address of the 15 oncologists in a certain zip code and only target people within that doctor's address. My question for you is, when I tried to do those searches in Google, it wasn't easy to find, if at all. Like, I assume there's a way of doing it because I've heard of people doing it. But how do you even get to that level of specificity and personalization? Because then I know that individuals sitting in an oncologist's office either have something to do with oncology and possibly are possible subjects. So have you had any experience with that?
Absolutely. We work in rare disease oncology recruitment, and it's a very, very tough area to recruit patients in, because you will get patients who do pre-qualify, but then they miss one or two parts of the inclusion or exclusion criteria, or the timing is not right. So, they're between the window, but not there yet, or they just finished the window, or they've just been treated by a specific medication, so they don't qualify for the study anymore. It's just, we can get the patients, but it's finding the needle in the haystack that's really tough. So what we have done strategically is we've tried to expand across different states. For example, recruiting patients outside of the study site locations. So you have your study sites, we geofence initially around the site.
I have a question. How do you do that, though? How do you geofence around a site? Because as you pointed out, when you go into Google, it doesn't go, give me the zip code you want, give me the exact address you want to geofence around. They give you zip code level sort of personalization.
Yeah, you can do zip code or city.
Mm-hmm.
And you can, social media used to allow you to radiate from a specific location, like you have a radiate out. But in Google, you can do by zip code or by city. Typically what we do by city, and we target cities around that city.
But that's still too big, isn't it? Because I only want the oncologist's office.
Let's say the oncologist's office is in Dallas, right?
Sure.
Okay, so you can target San Antonio, you can target Dallas, you can target Mansfield.
But that's all I can do. I cannot target, I'm making this up, 1, 2, 3, 4 Doctor's Office Way, Dallas, Texas.
I don't believe Google allows you to radiate out like social media does. Like Facebook had a great function where you can radiate out to like certain miles.
Okay.
So I'm not sure how that works in Google Ads. However, I do know that you can target by city, by zip code, by state.
Okay. Very interesting. But now one of the things that's interesting also is you didn't mention the social media platform everyone's talking about right now, which is Twitter. You talked about Facebook, you talked about Instagram, you've talked about all these other options. How how valuable is Twitter in your world in terms of subject recruitment?
It offers minimal value in my experience. I mean, there's a reason why it was failing before Elon Musk acquired it, because it wasn't performing well in terms of its ads. Now, compared to Google, right? That has kept us away from Twitter for that specific reason. However, it is a great platform I think that if I'm convinced that it is an effective platform, because currently all I hear is, oh, doesn't work from every industry. And right. I think once the word on the street, says, oh, Twitter's a great platform for advertising, that's when I'll start looking into it. But I'm not sure it's worth looking into if everyone is saying that it's not effective. But what's cool is there's patient groups on there. There's a lot of information on there and targeting opportunities for Twitter. And also,
could you talk a little bit about that? Yes, there are patient groups on there, but could you talk a little bit about how you target the patient groups? I mean, you can have a conversation with them, but how do you market to patient groups and specifically patients within patient groups using a system like this?
So I looked into Twitter's advertising, and it does have some functionality like, keywords and mostly keywords and specific hashtags, for example, that you can that you can target. So those are all areas that are great tools that you can use to target those patients. Now, the only concern is all the fake accounts that are on there too. And it has a lot of bots on there. So that's another problem that, that is a challenge with Twitter is how do you know that what you're getting, is not a click from a bot, or whether what you get is a real person or a hacker. Like, you just don't know who's on there. And, you would be wasting your clicks, wasting your ROI on things that, let's say that you have 2 million patients who have cancer, for example. How do you know that those 2 million are 2 million, or if it's just 100,000 real patients?
Right.
Don't know. And so that's a challenge with Twitter that, but Google, on the other hand, that those are real people doing real searches, because Google has a way to identify a user, right? That is an active user, not just some bot.
So one of the big interesting things about social media marketing and targeting is something that Gary Vaynerchuk talks about, because he came in at the early stages of Google Ads. And he always talks about how he bought up the Google AdWords, and he'd sort of market to those keywords, when it wasn't expensive to do so. So what that taught me, and what you're teaching me also in this conversation, is if all else is the same, timing is critical. So if that is true, we're hearing Elon Musk talk about moving Twitter. I mean, obviously Twitter still has to pay its bills and all those good things, but they're pivoting towards becoming the quote unquote town hall. That's what he's seeing. Does that raise opportunities that you hadn't considered till today, because it is quote unquote the new town hall?
Absolutely, it raises opportunities, right? It's like a green field. Nonetheless, there are always risks involved with jumping in too early. I mean, for example, you saw what happened with the blue badge situation. I mean, yes. Lilly's stock tanked because some fake account said that Lilly's offering insulin for free, right? And it was imitating the Lilly account with the blue badge. So now they're implementing some gold badges, which is like the real deal, which is, I mean, what difference does it make, right? He's just trying to generate more revenue from the platform itself by selling these verified badges. But the gold badges, I mean, what's the difference between having no badge and a blue badge versus a blue badge and a gold badge? It's like the same thing. Right, so I would wait on Twitter a bit more to see how that plays out. Yeah, but most certainly, I would like to see more credibility, less bots, less bot reports, for example. And yeah, once we see some stability happening there, that would be a great opportunity to then jump in and evaluate the platform. But currently, as it stands, it's a bit chaotic, I think, to jump in right now.
So interesting. So we've sort of talked about the two big ones, which is Facebook. Well, three big ones: Facebook, Instagram, and Twitter. Another big one is obviously LinkedIn. I happen to think it's a terrible idea because I think LinkedIn's not geared towards subject recruitment. It's really more towards hiring people. But is there an angle I've missed on it?
So LinkedIn is an interesting platform. Well, firstly, because you can target business professionals,
Right.
But it's also extremely expensive to target business professionals. But that's all you're going to get is business professionals, not patients.
Right.
So that's not an appropriate platform for patient recruitment specifically.
So is that the only B2B platform you're aware of? Because I think of it as a B2B, really, for lack of a better term.
No, Google's also a B2B.
Is it?
Yeah, sure. I mean, any business can target any business. Like you look at IBM commercials and ads that target, business people. You could pretty much do anything in Google. But with LinkedIn, it's specifically targeted to professionals. You're not going to have people talking about their illnesses on LinkedIn unless they're an advocate or something, which I've seen. But you're not going to get groups of patients who, like you can't have the ability to target oncology, right?
Right.
Or, gastrocolic issues or whatever. Like you can't target those disease indications in LinkedIn. You can target by profession, by their role, by the company, how large the company is, but that's pretty much all you're limited to. So
that raises three other platforms that are remaining for those people who are keeping track. The other big behemoth in the room is TikTok. Mm-hmm. Have you done any TikTok ads?
I thought a lot about TikTok ads, and TikTok is an interesting platform because their advertisements are focused on generating a TikTok and making your TikTok go viral. And then you click on learn more, sponsored. Are you interested in this? And so what's really cool about TikTok is that there are real patients there. And they have a lot of followers. For example, there's this one patient who has, she's got, what disease is it? Tourette's syndrome?
Sure.
And she just films herself with doing tics, and it's really like interesting and funny and like entertaining to watch, and really also interesting to learn more about how these people live, and when I learned about that, it's like there are all these people who are interested in Tourette's syndrome and raising awareness about Tourette's, right? Like indirectly, this person is doing a good thing for the disease by raising awareness about it, So I think that what's cool is that when Instagram, you have those influencers, right? They get paid by like a hair product company, and all of a sudden their shampoos start to sell, I think a great idea would be to approach those specific people on TikTok and ask them to do a sponsored TikTok for you and be like, hey, here's me doing my thing, right? But also there's a study going on for Tourette's if you're interested in Tourette's. And click on the link below, and that'll be, you can promote that TikTok, So that would be like using the influencer approach in TikTok, I think would be an effective means to try to recruit patients, because that these, even though they have like 1 million followers, that a chunk of that are people who can relate to them and have the same disease as them, right? Yeah. It may not be targeted.
You and I will probably have a different discussion altogether on influencer compliance and influencer regulation and how that comes together, because between Instagram and, most of social media is influencer sort of game. It's interesting. I also have found myself talking a little bit about tobacco marketing regulation. And the big company was Juul, or is Juul, but more was at this point. The reason they had a major problem is because they were targeting kids using influencers, which they didn't realize, and the FDA really went after them for that. So it's interesting to me what influencer marketing and targeting can do, but I'm also fascinated with the idea of taking a potential ad target using influencers to your IRB and saying, what do you guys think about that? Because our IRB is really geared to look at promotional compliance from an influencer. What are they looking at? Because they really are looking at a fixed set of rules. And this is when you start getting into OPDP requirements and the like, and I find that fascinating. Have you ever run a influencer-based ad through an IRB before?
No. I mean, typically when IRBs look at the data or whatever you present to them, it's usually scripted.
Right.
And some IRBs require a moderation policy. So, for example, if some people make posts on something, you have to moderate it to and show them a moderation plan so that no misinformation gets out there. So that if an adverse event is reported, you're monitoring it, etc. And that creates more challenges. With social media, you can at least block the comments so you don't have to deal with it. But at the same time, if you do allow for comments, you have to moderate it and make sure no one's reporting adverse events. So it kind of turns into this whole thing where it can, open a can of worms, especially on a platform like TikTok, which allows you to make comments. And I'm not sure they have restrictions on the comments. I need to look into it. But I mean, let's say, Cow Dude 101 reported an adverse event. How do you contact Cow Dude 101? Who do you know who that is, right? So
right. It's so I can help answer that, by the way. The FDA put out a thing because they talk about this in the OPDP guidances. And what they talk about is they say that if you want to report adverse events, here's a link to where to report those adverse events. So you give people access to it using a process like that. It's a little bit more cumbersome when you're talking about videos and the like, because do they really have an ability to click only? And if you only have one link, is that how they use it? Obviously, then not depending on things like Linktree and the like to go further. I'm going to ask one more question because I know we're getting a little bit into the time, but so the two remaining ones are now much smaller players than they used to be. These are what I almost think of now as legacy social media, for lack of a better term. But TikTok is sort of the new Vine, so ignore Vine. But the idea was it's all about content generation. The other two places that you have the other big place that you have a lot of content generation is Quora. And it's still sort of hobbling around. But what Quora lets you do is create answer questions that are specific to a specific goal and a specific disease state, possibly. And the result of that will be the people who interact with it, the people who target it. It's a much more focused type of conversation. Have you ever used Quora for subject recruitment? Do you see any opportunities there or not quite?
I'm familiar with Quora, and what's cool about it is that when you type in a Google search, oftentimes Quora is one of the first few results that shows up, right?
Yeah.
So when you click on it and you have a question about how to deal with your disease state, that is something where you can be like, oh, here's a clinical trial. I think it's a great idea, honestly, because that people, who are looking at that are searching for something. But there's a big but. In order to get to Quora, you first have to go through Google.
So why bother?
Why bother? And your ad is going to show up on the very top. So depending on, how you bid on it, whether you have an expensive bid, like for example, we're bidding against Stanford's and the MD Andersons with the same disease state, but they're targeting patients who, for regular treatment, not for clinical trials. And our budget is not even as high as some of those institutions. So our ad doesn't even show for that specific keyword. So that could be an effective way of like, if they go to
Yeah.
Quora, but I don't know what the volumes look like in Quora or how that, how that shows up. But it could potentially be like a secondary platform to look at for those expensive, where you get bid out of Google.
Very interesting. And the last one, and we'll call it after this one, but the last one is Pinterest. Is that even a valid? I don't know if I've ever seen disease ads or disease awareness ads or marketing ads associated with diseases on Pinterest, which tends to be more design based. What is your take on that?
Yeah, I mean, there's only like 4,000 followers for like oncology, okay, in Pinterest. And when I think of Pinterest, I think of like, grandma doing the yarn, like knitting stuff. Like, oh, look at the sweater that I just created and it looks so beautiful.
Right.
I don't see it as a platform where patients go. And if you just type in like oncology nursing, oncology, like there's only like 100 followers, like a couple thousand followers. So I'm not sure that, it's a platform where patients go to learn about medicine.
I forgot one very big one that I should have had in there. Speaking of content, which is YouTube videos and podcasts.
Mm-hmm.
I just recently, like literally today, got an email from a company asking if I'd be interested in interviewing someone from their company. Generally open to most conversations, but the idea being, I want to do this because it leads to an interesting conversation, not because you're trying to promote something. My question for you is, have you found success in recruiting subjects? So not marketing your company, but recruiting subjects from podcasts or from YouTube videos?
Mm-hmm. So YouTube is a part of Google.
Sure.
And along with your keyword searches, there's an option to include YouTube videos.
Yeah.
However, we found that keyword searches is the most effective platform to generate patient leads, even when compared to YouTube. So the ROI is higher, the volume is higher, because of course everyone opens their Google search engine and type in something about their disease, and that's the first thing that shows up. And then YouTube sort of trails them, if they're on YouTube and looking at things, and it's the right time, and the advertisement comes up, you have like a little, 15-second advertisement that talks about the disease and about the clinical trial. But we've done that, and we found that keyword searches tend to be effective.
And how about podcasts themselves, so without the YouTube algorithm associated with it?
So it's tough to get to patients through podcasts unless you're working with a large organization like a nonprofit, for example, that targets those specific patient populations, and you're doing a podcast and focusing on that patient population. We found that's more of like a raising awareness campaign and not necessarily generating leads specifically. So you'll get people to talk more about it, but you will not get the leads that you need right now for your clinical trial compared to your keyword searches.
So this is the right forum for a drug company that's trying to market their product, not the right forum for a site trying to get subjects. So fascinating. Mo,
it can, because if you're raising awareness, other physicians will be aware of your study and they will refer patients. But that's not an immediate outcome. It's sort of like a long-term outcome. And the key is to keep advertising, or rather using communications methodologies to continue to raise awareness. So these types of podcasts are not something that you can, again, it's not an immediate thing, but it's an ongoing thing, and you have to have a budget and a schedule for those communications in order for it to start working effectively.
I love it. Mo, we're well past time, but any parting words?
For the sponsors who are trying to recruit patients, I know your protocols are getting more and more complex. I know patients are harder and harder to find. Using automation tools and really good advertising methodologies will get you the patients. You just have to bear with it and understand that it's not going to, you just have to keep going at it in order to get your patients.
Awesome. And Mo, more importantly, how can people reach you?
You send me an email, mo@cliniviz.com. And you can also reach me by telephone at 646-628-6657 or through my LinkedIn profile.
Awesome. Thank you again, Mo.
Thanks, Darshan.
This video and podcast is brought to you by the Kulkarni Law Firm. Reach out to the Kulkarni Law Firm for advice on third-party issues, state board issues, contracting, pharmacy purchase and sales issues, and more, especially in the context of fraud and compliance. Reach out now at darshan@kulkarnilawfirm.com or call me at 302-252-6959. You can also just visit our website at kulkarnilawfirm.com. That's KULKARNI lawfirm.com.